Hello and welcome, I'm Joshua Barnes and you're watching The World Report. Let's first take a look at the headlines. A passenger plane carrying 67 people has crashed in Kazakhstan, likely killing dozens. Preliminary information coming from the wreckage suggests that around 25 to 27 people have survived, with up to 42 fatalities. The flight was intended for Grozny in Russia from Baku. Syria's new leaders have dissolved rebel factions, merging them under their defence ministry. Meanwhile, protests have broken out after a Christmas tree was burnt in central Syria. Japan's foreign minister is meeting his Chinese counterpart in Beijing. Talks on seafood trade is expected to be on the agenda in the midst of a ban from China following a release of radioactive waste into the ocean. As deadly strikes continue to batter the Gaza Strip, reports of hospital patients being forced to move have surfaced. Injured and ill people have made the miles-long journey to another hospital on foot, according to the territory's health ministry. Russian missiles have targeted Ukraine's energy infrastructure in a major attack. Cruise and ballistic missiles have been used, with civilian injuries reported in Kharkiv. At least 21 people have been killed after a controversial election in Mozambique. Deadly clashes broke out after the nation's top court confirmed the governing Frelimo party's victory in the disputed election. South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol has defied a second summons over his short-lived martial law declaration. Following public and political outcry, Yoon has been stripped of his duties while remaining in post during a probe. Syria's new leaders have agreed with the country's rebel groups on their dissolution and integration of the defence ministry. However, there was no mention of whether the Kurdish forces based in the northeastern part of the country are among the groups that will disband. The interim government has been trying to reorganise the country's military since Bashar al-Assad's regime was overthrown. Meanwhile, Syrian Christians have attended Christmas Eve services for the first time since the overthrow of Assad. This comes as an early test of the new Islamist ruler's pledges to protect religious minorities' rights. Hours before the service, hundreds of protesters in Damascus gathered to denounce an incident in which a Christmas tree was burned in the northern countryside of Hama in western central Syria. We're now joined by our correspondent, Aditya Wadwan. Aditya, I'd like to come to you first and look specifically here at what this means to the rebel groups that were so influential in overthrowing Bashar al-Assad. Their integration into the defence ministry. What exactly does that mean and what will be their role moving forward in Syria?
Well, as per the latest update, Josh, the de facto leader of Syria, Ahmed al-Shara, has reached to an agreement with the rebel factions to come and to unite as one force under the Syrian Defense Ministry. However, what needs to be noted here is that the United States-backed Syrian Defense Forces is not the part of this deal. And earlier, the caretaker Prime Minister of Syria, Mohammed al-Bashir, has said that the Defense Ministry will be restructured using the rebel factions together. So it is a sort of a thing that this Syrian government is trying to bring all the rebel faction groups under their control. This is what it needs to be noted, Josh. Yes, back to you in the studio.
We're also joined today by Professor Madhav Nalapat, who is the editorial director of the Sunday Guardian. I'd like to speak to you, Madhav, firstly, relating to the Christmas market, the Christmas attacks on a Christmas tree that we've seen. My apologies. There was a burning of a Christmas tree during celebrations. The country, of course, is majority Muslim. However, there are smaller religious minorities, and this really is a first test for the new government, with an incident amongst the minority groups sort of causing outrage amongst them. So could you provide some more context on that for us?
Well, look, I'd like to say, Joshua, I don't know if you're one of that rare group of people that believe that you can keep a wolf as your domestic pet and that expect it to change into a spaniel. It's not going to happen. A wolf is going to remain a wolf and sooner or later will display that wolfish behavior. The fact of the matter is that this is a terror group, and it basically detests the entire Shia group of that very great religion of Islam. It is basically very, very hardcore Wahhabi. It is completely addicted to violence. Violence is its first resort, not its last. And therefore, quite frankly, I mean, what happened, this particular Christmas tree burning, is an outrageous act. Anybody burning a Christmas tree is, frankly, somebody who's devoid of humanity and any sense of human values. But the fact of the matter is that this organization that is technically, I mean, this group of people that are supposed to have taken charge in Syria are basically groups that are implacably opposed to Christianity, to Buddhism, to Hinduism, to Shia Islam, and to any sect within the Sunni faith that is not hardcore Wahhabi. So I'm not surprised by that Christmas tree attack at all. And I would really like to say, let's test the government by seeing how strong the punishment is for the perpetrators of this crime. But the perpetrators need to pay a heavy price for this kind of a crime. Joshua.
Professor Nalapat, I want to bring it back to the news that we're getting that the rebel factions will become part of the Defence Ministry. What do you think this will do for the people in Syria? There are also thoughts amongst Syria that the previous regime was more barbaric and more brutal, but these groups over the years, as you've alluded to already, have been involved in other activities. They were involved in the uprising. They are militarised. So what could the impact be within Syria?
Joshua, let me take you back to 2011, a country called Libya. I've traveled extensively in that entire region, so I can speak from my previous experience. The fact of the matter is that we heard the same song in Libya. Oh boy, that tyrant Gaddafi has been removed, and now you're going to see peace and tranquility and prosperity and unity among everybody who has basically removed the tyrant Gaddafi. Of course, the tyrant Gaddafi was dispatched in a particularly cruel manner. No wonder Bashar Assad took the next flight to Moscow to escape that kind of a fate. But the fact is, Libya soon fell apart. The so-called amicable settlement between the factions soon fell apart. And that's, in my view, as someone who has studied this region, going to happen here as well. These factions are implacably opposed to each other. The factions are supposed to have come together. They have fought each other. They have shed blood, the other faction's blood and their own blood in that war. They're not going to forget that. And frankly, this government will have no control over 90% of the armed people in these various factions. So I don't expect this to last very long. Frankly, Bashar Assad was a much worse dictator in terms of giving welfare to the people than Gaddafi. Gaddafi at least gave substantial welfare to the people. Mr. Assad, unfortunately, most of the welfare went for him, his family and friends. And now they're all happily settled in Moscow or in Russia. But the fact of the matter is, this will fall apart. The divisions are too big. The ideological conflicts. You've got even within a hardcore ideology, you've got multiple people with even more hardcore ideologies. That conflict is going to prevail. So I don't believe this deal is going to last any longer than a similar deal that took place in Libya in 2011, Joshua.
Professor Madhav Nalapat, thank you very much for joining us. We now move to a story coming out of Asia with the Japanese Foreign Minister Takeshi Iwaya, who was met with counterpart Wang Yi and other top officials in Beijing. The two sides have agreed to increase cooperation despite acknowledging challenges. The visit is Iwaya's first to China since becoming Japan's top foreign diplomat earlier this year. The duo have discussed key factors in maintaining a conservative and stable relationship. China and Japan are key trading partners, but increased friction over disputed territories and military expenses has frayed ties in recent years. Last year, China branded Japan's decision to release reactor cooling water into the Pacific as selfish. Now, China's foreign ministry say Beijing aims to strengthen communication to properly manage differences with Japan. We're joined again by our correspondent Aditya Wadwan. Aditya, looking at the incident that's here in terms of the reactor water which has gone into the ocean, can you provide us some more context on that?
Well, exactly, Josh. China had imposed the ban on Japanese seafood last year in August, when they had been, because Japan had been releasing the radioactive water from the Fukushima nuclear power plant. As per the agreement reached in September, the Japan needs to work upon this factor so as to, so as to any chance if China intends, if, then only China will intend to, lift this ban on the seafood, thereafter, since this meeting is happening between the two foreign ministers in Beijing, things are expected to move steadily in this manner as far as this thing is concerned. If we talk about other contexts, China and Japan are already, engaged in a conflict in the East China Sea, because of the maritime disputes in the East China Sea, with America also playing a role. So it needs to be seen as to how this particular ban on seafood moves forward, because during the meeting, both the meetings will take some topics of mutual interest will take place between the two leaders, and it will be very significant as far as this ban on this Japanese seafood is concerned. Japan will have to have to work out on some modalities, to work upon this problem, and that henceforth we can see if China allows the import of seafood, Japanese seafood in the future or not. Yes, Joshua. Back to you in the studios.
We're also joined by a guest, Satoru Nagao, who is a fellow at the Hudson Institute. Satoru, I'd like to talk to you about this conversation specifically that's happening and happened today. In terms of the talk that we're getting, it's about a seafood trade sort of deal and ban. Do you think more is going on? Our reporter there, Aditya, alluded to the current sort of instability in the region with the United States involved, considering we have China and Taiwan who are facing off. Is there more at play here, or is this just looking at the issue that's come after the incident with the reactive water?
Seafood issue is only one of the issue. Indeed, this kind of Japan-China negotiation has happened because of the idea of the Prime Minister Ishiba. He is quite traditional Japanese politician, especially we can find such type, old type, before the Shinzo Abe sworn in. Japan tried to engage with China to calm down the tension. That is the pattern of the Japanese traditional politician, and Prime Minister Ishiba is also similar type. So he wants to negotiate with China to calm down the tension related with Taiwan, related with the Japan-China direct conflict. So that's why he wants to engage. So he expects to invite Xi Jinping to Japan. That is his policy that many people expect. But such kind of traditional way faces three big problems. First one is under current situation, Japan and China has many problems, including the Chinese setting the buoy between Japan and Taiwan, sea between the Japan and Taiwan. And but within the EEZ, China set up this kind of buoy without informing Japan. So that's why Japan need to ask China to remove this kind of buoy. That is another matter, because such kind of buoy is a preparation to invade Taiwan. And another matter is, of course, even if the Prime Minister Ishiba want to negotiate with China, he lacks a stable situation in the domestic politics. So many Japanese do not support Prime Minister Ishiba's agreement with China. And the third one is, of course, new U.S. administration led by Trump. Trump's policy will be very tough against China. Under such kind of situation, even if the Prime Minister Ishiba wants to negotiate with China, he will face a tough situation related with Japan-U.S. relations. So that's why, even if the traditional way the Prime Minister Ishiba wants to do, he will face a tough situation and he will not achieve anything.
Satoru, I want to quickly touch on that, just to finish. What do you think the Western reaction is to these conversations? Of course, Japan, an ally with the US. We've got Donald Trump coming in, who, as you've mentioned, has already threatened serious sanctions on China. What do you think the West's response to this conversation and a potential growing of ties between the two Asian nations?
Just now, no problem. But next month, President Trump will sworn in, and he will choose a very tough stance from the first day. So it is expected that any move to cooperate with China will be the risk for Japan to cooperate with other Western countries. That is easy to expect.
Satoru Nagao, a fellow of the Hudson Institute, thank you so much for joining us. We now move on to northern Gaza, where Israeli forces have evacuated the Indonesian hospital, forcing patients to travel miles on foot to another facility. Amid the crisis, Christians in Gaza mark a sombre Christmas, praying for peace. While in Bethlehem, Jesus' birthplace, prayers are dedicated to victims of what many call genocide. Here is the full report on the crisis.
Famine Early Warning Systems Network warns of a devastating famine unfolding in northern Gaza, worsened by Israel's near-total blockade on food supplies. The agency predicts that deaths from starvation could reach catastrophic levels by next month. Amidst this, in Gaza's north, Israeli forces evacuated the Indonesian hospital, forcing patients, some on foot, to travel miles to another hospital. In Gaza, Christians observe a sorrowful Christmas, praying for peace amid the violence. Meanwhile, in Bethlehem, the birthplace of Jesus, prayers are dedicated to victims of what many call genocide.
هذا مش عيد، نحن بس ماخذينه العود طقوس صلوات وبس، مش أكثر من صلوات وبس. يعني
نتطلع للعيد إنه يكون في أمل وفي انتهاء للحرب، بس للأسف الوضع اللي إحنا موجودين فيه ما زالت الحرب مستمرة، واستمرارها بيزيد كل يوم عن يوم أقوى من أول.
Violence escalates in the occupied West Bank, where Israeli attacks on Tulkarem and Nur Shams refugee camps killed 8 Palestinians, including 2 women and a teenager. The attacks followed dawn raids that left both camps devastated. The death toll in Gaza continues to mount. In the past 24 hours alone, 21 people were killed. Meanwhile, Lebanese Prime Minister Najib Mikati has urged the US and France to pressure Israel to cease truce violations with Hezbollah and withdraw from southern Lebanon, stressing the need for stability in the region. Bureau Report, NewsX.
Let's now take a look at some news updates from across North America. Donald Trump has criticised Joe Biden for commuting 37 death row sentences to life imprisonment. He called the decision an insult to the victims' families. Trump promised to restore capital punishment after his inauguration. His focus includes violent offenders and killers. Legal experts, however, call the plan a challenge under existing laws. Trump has consistently advocated for the death penalty. The bald eagle is now the official US national bird. President Biden signed a law to formalise it. Congress had overlooked the designation for years. The eagle has been a national emblem since 1782, with its image appearing on seals, flags and currency. The bird symbolises strength and freedom. It's native to North America. Hawaii crime boss Michael Misk, aged 50, died from a fentanyl overdose in federal custody. Officials say the death was accidental but under investigation. Misk was convicted of racketeering and murder in July. He faced sentencing in January. He was found unresponsive on the 1st of December, with autopsy results expected to take 30 days. Drugs in prisons remain a growing concern across America. It is a bitterly cold Christmas morning in Ukraine. As per reports, there are power cuts in several regions of the country. Strikes on power plants have been a regular occurrence in Ukraine. In September, President Zelensky said 80% of Ukrainian energy infrastructure has been destroyed. Since then, there's been no let-up in the shelling. Here are the latest updates.
Russian missiles killed at least 1 person and damaged energy infrastructure across Ukraine. Ukrainian authorities said it was a massive Christmas attack. Air raid sirens rang over Ukraine on Wednesday morning while the Air Force reported the launch of Russian cruise missiles from the Black Sea. Ukraine faces its toughest winter of almost 3-year war as Moscow steps up its aerial bombardment and its troops advance on the front lines in the east. In an address celebrating Christmas, here's what Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said.
Сьогодні дуже особливий вечір, святвечір. І це наше третє Різдво у часи війни. Наша велика українська сім'я не може відзначати його повною мірою так, як хотілося б. Так, як це має бути. Не всі з нас вдома, на жаль. Не у всіх, на жаль, є дім. І не всі, на жаль,
A massive missile attack also pummeled Ukraine's northeastern city Kharkiv on early Wednesday. As per the reports, there were 7 Russian strikes and at least 3 people were injured. Bureau Report, NewsX.
Now let's take a look at some stories from across Europe. Pope Francis has launched observation of the global festival of Christmas with a sombre mass in the Vatican City. This year's Christmas once again takes place under the shadow of Israel's war on Hamas and Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Francis used his Christmas Eve Mass to urge Christians to think of the wars, of the machine gun children, of the bombs on schools or hospitals. French officials raised the death toll in Mayotte to 39 from 35. Earlier local authorities had said that thousands may have died in Cyclone Chido. The devastating storm hit the island about 10 days ago and the rescue operations are still ongoing. Authorities have said efforts to count the dead may be complicated by the fact that many of the deceased may have been undocumented migrants. Moldova is facing a harsh winter, but it will overcome the challenge, President Mai Sandu said at her inauguration for the second term on Tuesday. Sandu won a closely contested election in November. She faces a potential energy crisis as a threat of Russia cutting off gas supply to the nation looms. That is all we have time for. We'll be back shortly with more of the latest international news updates.